family.
I will love you.
And stand by you.
And stand by you.
As long as we both shall live.
Enjoying a trip to the beach with the family. The documentary uncovered personal text messages between Watts and Shanann that shed light on the deterioration of their.
They used to be the picture-perfect family, the wife's warm smile, the giggles of two little kids echoing through the house. But then overnight, everything vanished. Now, that home is nothing but silence and the haunting shadow of an unforgivable tragedy.
I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like, somebody has to.
He stood in front of the cameras, choking back tears, begging the world to help find his missing wife and kids. But behind that trembling voice was no heartbroken husband. He was a monster in disguise, a father, a husband, and a cold-blooded killer. They met in 2010, just a random encounter on Facebook. Shanann was vibrant, independent, and a fighter who'd battled lupus. She believed that everything happens for a reason. Then came Chris, a quiet, reserved oil field engineer who never stood out in a crowd. He didn't talk much, but he listened. And for Shanann, that was everything. She once said, "He was the only man who didn't run when he found out about my illness. The only one who made me feel safe." They got married in 2012, and to their friends. Shanann ran the show, while Chris just silently followed her lead. In 2013, baby Bella was born, bringing even more joy to their growing home. In 2015, little Celeste arrived. Now the house echoed with giggles and tiny footsteps. By 2018, Shanann was pregnant again with a baby boy they'd already named Nico. But happiness, sometimes it's just a carefully filtered photo. By early 2018, something shifted. Chris, the quiet, unassuming husband, started to change. He was hitting the gym obsessively, dressing better, losing weight fast, and suddenly, his phone never left his side. Shanann noticed. She wrote in her journal, "He doesn't touch me anymore. He doesn't look at me the way he used to. I feel like I'm not his wife anymore." Her best friend recalled. She was sad, worried. She was scared Chris was seeing someone else. The neighbors noticed too. They didn't fight loud, but something was off. They didn't act like newlyweds anymore. And they were right. Chris was cheating with a coworker, a woman he lied to, saying, "I'm already divorced," on the outside. The Watts family looked like a living Christmas card, a 5-bedroom home in Colorado, full of laughter, smiling photos of Shanann celebrating her thriving life. But behind the lens, Chris was bearing his emotions and nursing a secret affair. That tiny crack, barely visible, was starting to splinter, and the sound, it was the dry, sharp snap of something about to break. August 13, 2018, 1:48 a.m. On a quiet street in Fredericton, Colorado, Shanann Watts arrived home from a business trip to Arizona. Her best friend, Nicole Atkinson, had driven her back to the 5-bedroom house where Shanann lived with her husband, Chris Watts, and their 2 young daughters, Bella, age 4, and Celeste, age 3. Chris had been off work that weekend, staying home with the children. Inside the house, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Shanann's purse, keys, and the children's car seats were still in the car. Her phone and medication were left in the house. Her wedding ring remained on the nightstand. There was no indication she had left voluntarily. By morning, alarm bells started to ring. Shanann had a prenatal checkup, but she never showed. When Nicole called and got no answer, panic set in. At 12:10 p.m., she drove back to the house and rang the doorbell over and over again. Nothing. Only the faint sound of a dog's paws echoing behind the door. Nicole contacted the Frederick Police Department and officially reported Shanann Watts is missing.
Hi, Stacey. My name's Nicole, and I'm calling because I'm concerned about a friend of mine. I dropped her off at her house at 2 in the morning last night because we were out of town together, and we were on the way back from the airport, and she was having issues, and she's pregnant. And I haven't been able to get a hold of her this morning, and I've gone to her house, and her car's there, and stuff like that, but she won't answer the door, she won't answer phone calls, she won't answer text messages, and I'm just really, really concerned. And she had a doctor's appointment this morning, and she didn't go to it, and I don't know what to do.
Scott, how you doing?
How's it going?
So this is the only vehicle she would have?
Only one that, yeah.
She would drive? Okay. We're not finding her purse.
It's on the nightstand next to her. Takes off her hair.
During his initial interview with police, Chris Watts stated that he last saw Shanann around 2:00 a.m. when she returned home. According to Chris, the two had a serious conversation at around 4:00 a.m., during which he told her he wanted to separate. He described the discussion as intense but civil, a heated yet respectful exchange. Then, at approximately 5:27 a.m., Chris said he packed up his work gear, loaded it into his truck, and left for his job at Anadarko Petroleum. That, he told investigators, was the last time he saw his wife.
And we got back Monday or Tuesday, and then she flew out to Arizona Friday morning, and then she got back last night, about 2 a.m. The flight got delayed. She left about 11. She got here at 2.
Okay.
And I went to work this morning about 5:15, 5:30. Yeah, she said she was at her friend's house.
A few hours later, Chris Watts made a public appearance, calm but visibly emotional. He stood in front of local news cameras. His eyes appeared filled with pain. His voice cracked with emotion as he pleaded for help finding his missing wife and daughters.
I just want them people to know that I want my family back. Like, I want them safe, and I want them here. Like, this house is not the same. We usually park out there on the side. I just want to get everything back in. Be easier, so lugging everything out there, all the tools that I had to bring in. What else can I do with this?
14:37 p.m. Nate Trinastic, a watchful neighbor, invited police officers into his home to review footage from his Ring camera. The video showed Chris Watts at approximately 5:27 a.m. in the dim pre-dawn light, backing his pickup truck up to the garage. For the next 45 minutes, Chris methodically loaded heavy items into the vehicle quietly, deliberately, never stopping. Then, without hesitation, he drove off. No Shanann, no Bella, no Celeste, no sign of anyone else. While standing next to the officers watching the footage, Chris grew noticeably uneasy. He fidgeted, shifted from foot to foot, moved his hands constantly. He couldn't stand still.
Do whatever, but watch, you'll see him get out, and he walked back and forth a couple times.
But the strangeness didn't stop there. On the very same day Shanann and the girls went missing, Chris Watts made two unsettling phone calls. First, he contacted the girls' daycare to inform them that Bella and Cece would not be returning in the fall. Later that day, he called a real estate agent to inquire about selling the family's 5-bedroom home birthday balloons from the last party still clinging to the walls. Investigators had one pressing concern. Where exactly was Chris during the critical hours when his wife and daughters disappeared? Chris told police he had gone to work at an Anadarko Petroleum oil site. GPS coordinates from his work truck appeared to confirm his statement, but when detectives pulled GPS logs directly from Anadarko's internal system, a discrepancy emerged. Instead of heading to his scheduled job site, Chris drove straight to the remote oil field known as Survey 319. He stayed there for nearly 90 minutes, a stop not listed anywhere on his reported shift schedule. Chris Watts was now the primary suspect. On the afternoon of August 15th, a police drone scanned the desolate plains surrounding the oil field. Investigators spotted a bedsheet printed with a pattern matching pillowcases found inside the Watts home discarded near the site. At Survey 319, the drone's camera captured an image of a purple-flowered bedspread a visual match for the missing bedding from the Watts master bedroom, just a few feet away. The ground appeared freshly disturbed. Back at the house, investigators sifted through the trash and recovered a pillowcase with the same floral pattern. It bore a clear fingerprint belonging to Chris Watts. Based on the evidence and witness statements, investigators began piecing together the sequence of events leading up to the murders. The suspected motive: marital conflict. Shanann had discovered that Chris was having an affair that morning. Their conversation turned to infidelity to the text messages Shanann had seen. To the woman Chris had been hiding, the confrontation escalated. The questions became sharper, the silence heavier. Then Chris attacked. He strangled Shanann with his bare hands, pressing down until she stopped moving. It happened right there on their bed, the same bed where they had once made promises to each other. The noise likely woke Bella and Celeste. Moments later, Chris is believed to have ended their lives to silencing them forever. After the murders, Chris wrapped the bodies of Shanann and the girls in bedsheets. He dragged them into the garage and loaded them into the back of his work truck. He drove over 60 kilometers to a remote oil site. At Survey 319, Chris buried Shanann in a shallow grave. The two girls, Bella and Celeste, were placed into separate oil tanks. Then he returned home, showered, washed his clothes, and began playing the part of the grieving husband, searching for his missing family. But at that point, all of this was still just a theory. August 15, 2018, Frederick police made their move. Chris Watts was summoned for formal questioning at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI headquarters. Chris arrived looking composed, collected, and seemingly cooperative. He agreed voluntarily to undergo a polygraph examination.
To be on you for the rest of your life until we resolve it tonight. Unless we can talk about this more tonight, this is going to follow you forever. I promise you, when you start talking to us, you will feel better. I know you already feel better about getting the Nikki off your chest.
Please don't like involve her in this or anything like that. She can't do that.
You got to help me.
I know.
Chris, we're giving you a lifeline right now. You need to take it. You need to reach out and take it.
He insisted he had nothing to hide. Under the weight of psychological pressure and the silent stare of investigators, Chris broke. He asked to speak with his father, Ronnie Watts. Inside that small, dimly lit interview room, with a recorder rolling and security cameras watching, Chris made his first confession. It was only a partial truth. And even then, it was wrapped in yet another desperate lie he clung to. One last attempt to rewrite what he had done.
This polygraph failed it. Yeah, because there's too much emotions. So I mean, they're not gonna let me go.
Is there any reason why they shouldn't?
They know I had an affair. And they know. I can protect her.
What?
I want to protect her.
You don't want to protect her?
I don't know what else to say.
What happened? Huh? She hurt him?
Yeah.
While speaking with his father, Chris finally admitted to killing Shanann, but he didn't tell the whole truth. Chris claimed that Shanann had murdered their two daughters in a fit of rage after he told her he wanted a separation. Overcome with fury, he said, he strangled Shanann in retaliation, then transported all three bodies to the oil field for burial. But the lie began to crumble. August 16 in 2018, authorities discovered Shanann Watts' body buried in a shallow grave, barely covered by dirt. Nearby, they located the remains of Bella and Celeste submerged in separate tanks filled with crude oil. The autopsy results exposed the brutal reality. There were no child-sized fingerprints on Shanann's body, no trace of the girl's DNA beneath her fingernails, and most importantly, no signs that Shanann had ever harmed her children. The recovery team nearly collapsed at the scene, inside the two oil tanks. They found the remains of Bella and Celeste Watts, victims of a crime so brutal, so devoid of humanity, that even seasoned professionals were shaken to the core. Chris Watts had broken his daughter's shoulders, snapping the bones just to force their small bodies through an 8-inch, 20-centimeter hatch at the top of the crude oil tanks. The bodies had been submerged in oil for days, their flesh degraded, their features unrecognizable. The autopsy results were devastating. Bella had crude oil in her lungs and stomach, indicating she was still alive, still breathing when Chris forced her into the tank. Her tongue and cheek were torn, evidence of struggling. Deep bruises around her neck matched the shape of a grown man's hands. For Celeste, there were signs of suffocation. Bruises around her mouth suggested she had been smothered. Chris, a former serviceman trained in tactical control and lethal force, knew exactly what he was doing. Investigators asked how a grown man could fit a child through such a narrow opening. The answer came with the autopsy. Both girls' shoulders were fractured post-mortem, forced inward to fit through the hatch. Bella's body was torn, her scalp partially detached. Her stomach was filled with crude oil. Investigators believe Chris strangled her inside the truck, likely while she sat silently in the back seat with the bodies of her mother and younger sister beside her. Bella, quiet and passive by nature, bore a striking resemblance to her father. Chris may have counted on her silence. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera captured what appeared to be the shadow of a small child moving near the truck, a chilling confirmation that Bella was still alive when Chris loaded Shanann's body into the vehicle. Even the trained technicians tasked with removing the children's remains fainted during the operation. As for Shanann, her autopsy revealed she was 16 weeks pregnant. Her uterus, umbilical cord, and the fetus had been partially expelled from her body, likely due to the extreme pressure when Chris straddled her chest during the act of strangulation. It was this gruesome aftermath that led him to return upstairs, grab a bedspread, and wrap her body before dragging it to the truck. Chris Watts was never brought to trial before a jury. Instead, his official sentencing hearing took place on November 19, 2018 at the Weld County Courthouse in Colorado. Just 2 weeks earlier, on November 6, Chris had pleaded guilty to all charges. There would be no trial, no defense, no more lies, only judgment. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Rourke, presented a damning case. Chris Watts, they argued, had not snapped. He had planned everything, carefully, deliberately. He strangled his wife with his bare hands, no blood, no noise, no signs of struggle. He then loaded Shanann's lifeless body into his truck. In the back seat were his 2 daughters still alive. He drove more than 60 kilometers to the oil site. It was not a spontaneous act. It was a calculated route, a window of time to think, and he chose to go through with it. At the oil field, he murdered each child one at a time. Then he disposed of their bodies in separate crude oil tanks. The goal to erase evidence, eliminate DNA, mask decomposition, avoid detection. Back at home, he staged a clean scene. He discarded the bed sheets and pillowcases, deleted phone data, hid his affair. Every step was cold, controlled, intentional. He didn't kill out of rage, Rourke told the court. He killed to free himself to start a new life without the burden of his family. Chris had initially tried to spin a false narrative. He claimed Shanann had strangled the children, and he had killed her in a moment of blind fury. But it was just another lie, a final insult to the victims he destroyed. November 19, 2018. Inside the Weld County courtroom, Judge Marcelo Kopkow delivered the final judgment.
The court is going to sentence you, sir, to a life sentence in the Colorado Department of Corrections.
Chris Watts did not receive the death penalty. There was one pivotal reason the victim's family, especially Shanann Watts' parents, made a heartfelt request to the prosecution. They asked that the death penalty be taken off the table. They wanted to avoid the pain of a prolonged and public trial. They wished to spare themselves the torment of hearing the graphic details repeated again and again in open court. And most of all, they wanted to preserve the memory of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste with peace, not spectacle. Their final act of mercy meant that Chris Watts would spend the rest of his life in prison alone and forever cut off from the world he destroyed.
I wake up every morning just crying, thinking this is not going to be what's going to happen every single day. It's just so hard to get through it.
So, what could drive a husband and father to murder his entire family? To this day, experts remain unable to pinpoint a single, definitive trigger. But one thing is clear: the resentment had been simmering inside Chris Watts for years, silent, invisible, and ignored. Those who knew Chris described him as introverted and reserved from a young age, while his sister Jamie was outgoing and social. Chris was the quiet one, obedient, non-confrontational, always striving to please the adults around him. He learned early on that silence avoided conflict, and over time, that silence hardened into a shell. Inside that shell, emotions were buried, never processed, never spoken. By 2015, Chris and Shanann had filed for bankruptcy. The couple was drowning in debt, nearly $448 million. As Chris continued working at Anadarko Petroleum, Shanann's fortunes began to rise. She launched a career with the health and wellness company, Lavelle, earning up to $80,000 a year. Shanann traveled for work. She posted radiant images on social media. She became the public face of success. Chris stayed home with the kids, growing more withdrawn with each passing month. From the outside, they still looked like the picture-perfect family, but behind closed doors, Shanann controlled the finances, made the decisions, led the family. Chris simply nodded along. Friends and relatives began to notice he was no longer the man of the house, not even in his own life. Then came Nicole Kessinger, a co-worker at Anadarko. Nicole saw Chris as a man on the verge of freedom, emotionally separated, about to leave a failed marriage. The two began an affair. They exchanged songs about new love, made plans for romantic getaways. Chris started working out. He transformed his body, and more than anything, he began to believe that he had a chance to start over. A clean slate, a new life, one without Shanann, without the girls, without the weight of a life he never truly chose. When Shanann told Chris she was pregnant with their third child, the dream, his fantasy of a new life, collapsed.
So pink means...
That's just the test.
I know. It just says the pink is going to be girls.
I don't know. Just the test.
That's awesome.
Guess that's what happens when you want it to. That's what Chris said to Shanann when she revealed the news about the baby. In a message to her friend, Shanann confessed something had changed. Chris had grown cold, distant. On August 7th, he told her directly he didn't want another child. The tension was building. The marriage was unraveling. Financial stress loomed. And in the background, another woman was waiting. By August 9th, Shanann canceled the gender reveal party. Chris showed no emotion, no interest, no joy. For Chris, this unborn child wasn't a blessing. It was a final chain, a living symbol of everything he wanted to escape. And so sometime between the discovery of his affair and the confrontation that followed, something inside Chris broke. Perhaps in that final argument, when Shanann confronted him about the other woman, he made a choice to erase it all, to silence the chaos, to destroy his entire family in order to set himself free. Chris Watts now pays for his crimes in a prison cell alone. No family, no visitors, no one left to care. When asked what was going through his mind the moment he murdered his family, Chris said, "I was in a different headspace. If I had stopped to think, none of this would have happened. If I hadn't killed Shanann, I'd have a 5-year-old daughter today, a 4-year-old, and maybe a 1-year-old son, with a beautiful wife by my side. Now, I have nothing." Shanann Watts, a resilient woman who fought through illness to build a life for her family, a mother who worked tirelessly to provide a better future, a wife who once wrote on Facebook, "My family's the most precious thing I have." She died at the hands of the man she trusted the most. Bella, 4 years old, bright, full of life. She loved to dance and sing. She whispered, "I love you, Daddy," before he ended her life. Celeste, just 3 years old, curious, innocent, too young to understand why the arms that once held her were now squeezing the life from her. And Nico, never born, never heard, buried alongside his mother in the cold earth. Chris Watts didn't just kill his family with his hands. He destroyed them with his silence, with his lies, with the selfishness that consumed every last piece of the man he once was. Thanks for tuning into our channel. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new videos, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories. Don't miss out.